Kenyan troops that form part of the East African Community Regional Force have begun their journey into the eastern part of the DRC, where other than peacekeeping, they will be expected to assist Congolese troops in a planned disarmament exercise. The contingent received its flag to head out on their tour of duty from the Commander-in-Chief and President William Ruto. Leila Mohammed has that report.
Kenyan troops have been deployed to the mineral but conflict-ridden eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo to battle a rebel offensive. After months of preparations for this duty that will be undertaken by troops from this region, the Kenyan troops are ready to make the move.
The moment you say how many you are, then somebody who is waiting for you will know how to counter you.
Whilst no official figures were announced due to security reasons, there have been reports that the 800-man team will travel immediately now that they have the Commander-in-Chief's blessing. Colonel Daniel Rotich, the commander of the Kenyan contingent, undertook his first orders of the new mission from his Commander-in-Chief when he received the Kenyan flag that will be a critical symbol of Kenya's new venture into peacekeeping inside the DRC. The colonel handed over the flag to the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Obiero, who then flew the flag high up as the troops danced and sang songs to give them morale ahead of the assignment at hand. For the team that will be part of a joint EAC peacekeeping mission, the Kenyan flag received months after a presidential agreement to send troops into the latest entrant in the East African Community was signed in Nairobi.
This contingent is structured at battle group level and has been prepared, well trained and equipped appropriately for the attainment of the EAC mandate within the EAC regional force structure, which has 2 battalions from Uganda, 1 battalion from South Sudan, 2 battalions from Burundi, and Rwandan troops operating on their territory along their common border with DRC.
Kenya will command the force, with Major General Jeff Nyaga leading the troops of the East African Regional Force, whose mission will be headquartered in Goma, eastern DRC. Once the boots hit the ground in the heart of the Great Lakes region, they will depend on skill, modern equipment, armor, and vehicular power to undertake their main mandate that will include humanitarian relief, maintenance of law and order, to plan and conduct operations within the eastern DRC region to contain the threat of armed groups.
We have agreed on the framework under which Kenya is going to work with the DRC forces for the purposes of disarmament, for the purposes of ensuring that civilians are protected.
In a mission where Kenya takes the lead in a movement where the region is taking care of its internal problems, they are hoping that this time around there will be a difference inside eastern DRC, in an area where international missions are now facing stiff challenges.
We have, as you know, the UN MONUSCO, a force that is there, a mission rather, and also there is the Force Intervention Brigade, which all belong to the UN. And therefore, until we get there ourselves as East African Community, and remember DRC is a member of the East African Community, we are very hopeful that they should be able to receive as well, because we are coming to help.
Whilst Kenya had been earlier seen as unsure whether she would deploy her boots inside DRC, a conversation between several heads of state within the region affirmed Kenya's position in engaging in its 42nd such peace mission since independence in 1963.
We owe a brotherly duty of solidarity to meet DRC halfway and stand together until the job is done.
Nairobi meetings to create a peace accord continue.
The challenge that we face, as you rightly point out, is in the North Kivus. And for that, we are still working very hard to ensure that we try to reach out to the M23 and to others.
The M23's resurgence has had resounding repercussions for relations in Central Africa, The increase in violence has alarmed the international community, with the African Union appealing for a ceasefire. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
The nomination of principal secretaries by President William Ruto has once again shone the spotlight on the issue of ethnic and regional balance, as well as gender parity, even as a list of 51 nominees was released. Among those nominated are 3 politicians and 5 principal secretaries from former President Uhuru Kenyatta's government. NTV's Vincent Odwar takes his binoculars and takes a closer look.
President William Ruto is still forming his Kenya Kwanza government. Wednesday, President Ruto unveiled his 51 principal secretary nominees who will be the accounting officers in the 49 state departments. The politicians who were nominated are former Lang'ata Member of Parliament Nixon Korir as PS Lands, former Nairobi County Deputy Governor Jonathan Mweke as Sports PS, and former Laikipia West MP Patrick Mariro as Defense PS. Others nominated are former legal advisor in the office of the Deputy President Korir Sing'oei as Foreign Affairs PS, former boss of the Lake Basin Development Authority Raymond Omolo as Interior PS, and Ruto's advisor during the campaigns, Professor Edward Kisiang'ani. Besides that, the president has also nominated 5 principal secretaries from former President Uhuru Kenyatta's government. There are former Education PS Belio Kipsang, Chris Kiptoo, Harry Kimutai, and Charles Hinga, who have been retained in their previous ministries, and Julius Korir, who has been moved from devolution to be the Cabinet Affairs PS. However, the list of 51 nominees is largely dominated by persons from one ethnic community in the country, a move that has raised doubts on President Ruto's belief in ethnic balance. Out of the 51 nominees, only 11 nominees are women, exposing President Ruto's failure to adhere to the 2/3 gender rule in public appointments. The president is now expected to submit the list of the nominees to Parliament for vetting by the respective relevant parliamentary committees to determine their suitability for appointment. Vincent Odur, NTV.
We'll look into that list when we look at the dailies this morning. I can see here Taifa Leo saying Ruto alivyogawa makatibu. So we'll look at that in a moment. But before then, the Office of the Control of Budget has summoned Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza and the Meru members of County Assembly to a meeting on Friday in an attempt to resolve the ongoing standoff over the implementation of the Ward Development Fund. This comes just a day after the members of the County Assembly rejected 7 out of 10 nominees for the County Executive Committee. Sydney Chizima has more.
The Controller of Budget, Margaret Nyakango, has now been roped into the current standoff pitting Governor Kawira Mwangaza against the Meru County Assembly. Nyakango is now offering to mediate on the implementation of the Ward Development Fund. Governor Mwangaza and the Speaker of the Meru County Assembly had both written to the Office of the Control of Budget seeking clarity over the implementation of the fund that has since prolonged the feud that has seen 7 out of 10 cabinet nominees rejected. But it appears Mwangaza is hell-bent on circumventing the setback and has now reduced the departments to 6, down from the 10. This, in turn, meaning the 3 approved nominees will now take up extra roles. In the new dispensation, Isaac Mutuma, the Deputy Governor, takes over the Department of Health Services in acting capacity. Monica Kadhono, who was approved by the Assembly as the CECM for Finance, has also been added the docket of Transport, Roads and ICT. Dixon Munene, approved by the Assembly to be the CECM Legal Affairs and Public Service Management, will now double up as the CECM for Agriculture. Dhuranira Idhana, who also made the cut as CECM Education, will also serve in the docket of Culture, Arts and Social Development.
My functions.
3 of the CECs approved by the Assembly on Tuesday have already taken oath of office. And while this happens, it appears the fight with the MCAs is far from over. In a bid to quell the tensions, Kawera had invited the MCAs with the purpose of inking a conciliatory deal. But in a letter, the MCAs stated that they had other engagements in their wards, further protracting their standoff.
We have petitioned, ama tunajaribu kupetition president wetu wa Kenya, Bwana William Ruto, ama Mheshimiwa William Ruto, aweze kuvunjilia mbali kaunti yetu ya Meru, tuende uchaguzi tena ndio watu warudi kwa kazi zao badala ya kuwa na hizo shida ambayo tuko nazo.
The Office of the Controller of Budget in a circular dated 2018 advised against the establishment of the Ward Development Fund, and it will be interesting to see how she will mediate on the matter that has threatened to stall operations in the county government of Meru. Sydney Chazima, NTV.
All right, as promised, we get into the dailies and that report on PSs. I see here the Daily Nation says Ruto government takes final shape with crucial slots filled. Focus now shifts to controversial CAS positions. Sharing the pie is how they've described it. Mix of old and new. List of proposed principal secretaries in the Kenya Kwanza administration reveals a delicate attempt by the president to equitably share the executive pie, but also exposes an inclination to reward party loyalists with plum positions. Now, this is on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation, but they've done a bit of analysis here. And they tell us the youngest person in President William Ruto's government is 43 years old so far. And that is Soipan Tuya and Susan, I beg your pardon, Susan Nakumicha. She is the Health CS and Environment, Soipan being the Environment CS, Susan being the Health CS. The oldest is 66, being the Education Cabinet Secretary, Ezekiel Machogu, and Justin Muturi, former Speaker, now Attorney General. The average age of CSs is 54. Now, as for gender, the Ruto government has 7 female ministers out of 22 and misses the 1/3 gender rule by 2 percentage points. It also fails in the PS appointments with only 12 out of the 51 posts going to women. Now, they've tabulated the numbers and they tell us 31% of the CSs are female, 69% male, 23%, even lower, of the PSs are female, 77% male, therefore fails the gender balance test. Here we look at the worth of these cabinet secretaries. Total CS wealth amounts to 15.6 billion shillings. The average wealth per CS is about 650 million shillings. Now, as for distribution, we saw that report by Vincent Odoro on ethnic and regional balance. Hustler strongholds of Mount Kenya and Rift Valley take the lion's share of CS and PS slots. 50% of cabinet positions, that is 11 out of 22, went to Mount Kenya and Rift Valley. 50.9% of principal secretary positions, that is 26 out of 51, went to Mount Kenya and Rift Valley, and excludes 1 post for Turkana. Those are numbers there. So reminds me of something that Junaid Mohammed said on the floor of the House. Now we'll look at what else is on the front page of the Daily Nation now before we take a look at the other dailies. And economy, tighten your belts. Life is about to get tougher. MPs say in new report, delayed rains, the war in Ukraine, and a weak shilling will combine to push more Kenyans into poverty. Now we'll look at that report. It's on the back page of the Daily Nation. We will get to it. And then now in the education sector, ousted Wainaina, poised for return as Kenyatta University VC, the former vice chancellor who was hounded out of office in the last days of the Uhuru regime, is set to be reinstated today. That is at Kenyatta University. And shock, we saw that report of the baby who had a djembe in his head and his family complaining of medical negligence at Kenyatta National Hospital. Now, another report here, shock, as 217 dead babies abandoned at Kenyatta. And that report is by Angela Okech, page 10. 217 dead babies abandoned at Kenyatta. That is quite the shocking report indeed. And we see here now the analysis in detail of President William Ruto's government. I see him here at that event yesterday when he was sending off Kenya's troops to the DRC to support the peace mission there. And before we delve deeper into that, the Business Daily, well, let's take a look at the Standard. My touchscreen appears to be misbehaving at the moment. Let's look at their headline and Ruto's big gumble in PS choices. And how do they explain it? They say in a delicate balance, President retains a few PSs for continuity, goes for fresh blood in young ones, rewards loyalists and political allies, but falls short on regional balance, gender and minority representation. We can see here Chris Kipto, Raymond Omolo, Amos Gavesha, Charles Hinga, who also served under former President Uhuru Kenyatta, Jonathan Mweke, James Muhati, Korir Singoi, Shadrach Mwadime Belio Kipsang, who also served under former President Uhuru Kenyatta, Edward Kisiangani, who was a Don at the Kenyatta University prior to this nomination, John Tandui, Beatrice Inyangala, Juma Mukwana, Susan Mangeni, Nixon Korir, formerly MP Langata, and John Olutua and Umi Bashir. So those are some of the names. And I can see here they've also captured on the front page the call to end crimes against journalists. We delved deep into that with the Secretary General for the Kenya Union of Journalists yesterday. And I can see here bold roadside declarations haunt new CSs, KDF off to keep peace in troubled DR Congo. Setback for Kawira's cabinet. We had that report from Sydney Chizima. Body cams for taxman. Olympic hero breathes his last. So that's the Standard, of course, leading at those cabinet, those PS nominations. And if we look at the Star as well, before we get back to the dailies on my screen, it appears to be behaving now. Ruto to quash Uhuru's KU order, council quits. And that is Kiamba's reversal. Kiamba's team appointed after Adola's team refused to hand over title deed. This we also looked at on the front page of the Daily Nation. I can see at the top here, Waluke's twin assault for release from imprisonment. We did bring you that report from, that report earlier about Jubilee nominating him to the Parliamentary Service Commission. And I can see here again those who've been nominated to the position of PS. Rift Valley, Mount Kenya get lion's share of jobs. Did I not mention anybody here? I think I see Julius Bitok, Edward Kisiangani, Teresia Mbaika, and Chris Kipto, National Treasury. Jonathan Mweke takes up sports and arts. Belio Kipsang remains at the Education Ministry. I see Dr. Raymond Omolo here, Interior. He would take over from the PS Karanja Kibicho. All right. That is the front page of the Star, and I can see there's an audit on page 10. Patients' lives at risk as hospitals run out of blood. And here we have the Business Daily front page. Universities seek World Bank bailout on biting cash crunch. Universities Fund is seeking a grant to bridge deficit. Higher learning institutions struggling to stay afloat. This report by Lynette Igadwa. And just to capture a bit of what she's written, public universities are seeking a 2.4 billion shilling World Bank bailout to alleviate an acute cash crisis that is threatening to ground their operations. And the Universities Fund has revealed that it has submitted a request for a grant to the World Bank to plug the funding shortfall amid rising number of government-sponsored students. Let's take a look at what else is on the front page of the Business Daily. Moi Rai families get reprieve in 1 billion shilling land row with widow. And on their ticker today, Ruto unveils larger executive increases PS numbers by 9. And President William Ruto has named a list of 51 principal secretaries dominated by outsiders as he completes what is shaping up to be a more expanded cabinet from his predecessor. Kerry to net 5.2 billion shillings from inflation taxes. The taxman projects to collect an extra 5.2 billion shillings from the inflation adjustment on exercisable goods for the 2021-2022 year, underlying the double blow consumers face from a rise in the cost of living. And on it goes. So if we can also take a look at the Taifa Leo now. And I see something here on IPOA, and it just so happens that I have an IPOA commissioner in studio this morning. I did mention that we're looking at how to restore public confidence in the criminal justice system. And I see a polisi 18 wametupwa jela IPOA, wamesukumwa jela kwa kukiuka haki za binadamu. So we get deeper into that conversation. And then again, here the Taifa Leo captures those who have been nominated for principal secretary. So that is what is on the front page of the Taifa Leo. If we flip through the Daily Nation really quickly, I can see, well, all right. I think we'll leave it at that and get into our conversation with my one panelist who's arrived so far. But the rest tell me, I am reliably informed by way of text that they are on their way here. But I did mention that IPOA is represented this morning. I'm joined by Commissioner Doreen Muthaura. Karibu sana.
Thank you. Thank
you
very much.
Yeah, good to have you in studio with us. So yes. This morning our conversation is around how do we restore public confidence in the criminal justice system. Do you agree, at least from my perspective, do you agree that it has taken a bit of a beating in the last couple of weeks?
Yes, good morning. Indeed, it's a journey. The criminal justice system has many actors. Reforms are going on in different levels. From where we start at a criminal justice system is the entry point, where IPOA is mostly very concerned, because this is where the identification and generally the role of the police is quite pivotal. So as IPOA, since we hold the members of the National Police Service accountable, we are careful in ensuring that they are able to deliver on their mandate, hold them accountable to ensure that they are able to identify, maintain law and order, and so on. While at it, we are also responsible for investigation of the same officers. So as we hold them accountable, that is to ensure that they carry out their mandate as required by the Constitution and the law. We also have an obligation to investigate where they also commit acts of misconduct or criminal offenses. So in essence, there's a lot of improvement. In my view, we are not there yet because it's a journey. So step by step, we're headed there. So we have reforms by other actors. The DPP now has done quite a lot in terms of documenting, coming up with policies, coming up with instruments generally to guide the whole aspect of from how to prefer charges, the bond and bail, and so on. And then we also have DPP having prosecutors who are advocates of the High Court in almost all counties. The judiciary itself, decentralization and devolving its services, we have quite a number of new courts that have come up. So generally, not to judge the system per se, we are doing something. So from the IPOA point of view, we definitely commend the police officers, especially during the election. We were able to witness some level of professionalism. And we think if we proceed on that level, I think the police is on the right track. Now, there are issues that are currently in the media, and not only in the media, but generally members of the public are concerned. His Excellency the President was particularly very stern in his directions on what we should do as IPOA to ensure that we deal with this matter of extrajudicial killings I don't know whether it's right to call them such, and enforced disappearances that are purportedly caused by members of the National Police Service. So we're in the process of formulating a strategy which we will be advising His Excellency the President through the Cabinet Secretary, Professor Kindiki, by Friday this week. So that too is a strategy to reform and to deal with issues of enforced disappearances, investigating the police and so on. While at it, we are alive to the fact that it may not be only the police involved in that particular, that kind of atrocities. Yet, we are yet to get into the investigations deeply because of certain challenges that we've encountered. But the perception out there is that there could be more than one agency involved, because some of these units are multi-agency, also involving other security agencies, and therefore the approach we shall use shall be able to have on board or investigate all these actors, because from the IPOA point of view, we are restricted to only oversight National Police Service.
Okay.
So, yes, thank you.
So for many, first of all, when you say over the election period and you're commending the police conduct, and then you say it somewhat, you said it was somewhat professional?
Absolutely. Actually, we didn't have many complaints. There were some were pretty minor. We were able to resolve. So we think that was commendable compared to other years. 2007 and those other elections that have been held, we have had instances where the police did not conduct itself well, and we pointed out those misconducts. But this particular time, it was fairly reasonably good.
All right.
Yes.
Although it's not a glowing recommendation,
yes,
but you did say it's a work in progress.
It is indeed.
But for many, when you hear stories like, for many, when you come to the realization that there was a unit which was suspected of acting outside the bounds of the law, and it was disbanded, for many we thought we left that in the dark ages of the pre-constitution, pre-promulgation of the constitution, which we currently have. And IPOA, many thought, would be able to check these excesses of the police. Why hasn't it been able to?
Great. All right, let's start with the issue of units. Under Section 10 of the National Police Service Act, the Inspector General has a statutory obligation to ensure that the command and control of the service is seamless. And for him to be able to do this, he is allowed by the section, by that particular act, to create units from time to time. Similarly, the DIG responsible for Kenya Police Service and DIG responsible for Administration Police Service to have the mandate to establish such units, specialized elite units, whatever name they use them, and formations to ensure that they are able to execute their functions under the Constitution and the NPS Act. So while at that, the IG and the DIGs are obligated to inform the authority of such formations and units so that we are able to undertake inspections, so that we are able to monitor what they are doing and therefore hold them accountable in the execution of their function. Now, the process of establishment of units and the whole process is laid out in the standing orders, but some of the units are recognized by law, others aren't. Like, for example, the SSU unit, that the SSU that is currently making headlines is not one of those that is listed. And by the Act, the NPS Act and the standing order, I haven't seen a provision where the DCI can establish. And I want to assume that the unit was established by the Inspector General, because after all, he is in charge of the overall command and control of the National Police Service. Now, this information was not conveyed to us. Remember, you can only be able to monitor these units and formations if you have information about their existence. Like you and other Kenyans, we were shocked to know there is such an entity that is being used to carry out a certain agenda. And therefore, we made a request, not a request to the Inspector General to furnish us that is pursuant to our act, with all information, records, the composition, the terms of reference, what were the, when this unit was established, what are the conditions? What were they supposed to do? What was the intended objectives and so on? That information is yet to reach the authority. So, and that is one of the challenges when you ask me, why haven't we done what we ought to have done, is because of non-cooperation. When you request for this information, if indeed something is legit and something is done in the right manner, what is so hard about sharing this information so that the authority which is required by the Constitution and the law to hold you accountable should be able to vet, verify, and check whether indeed, or audit that operation and that unit and be able to exonerate or you know, communicate to the relevant institution, especially the president, and tell him this is legitimate, it was created under the law, this is how they carried out their function and so on. So in the absence of that cooperation, and which we consider it as a blue code of silence, where officers refuse to give information that may have some implication on their colleagues, we find we would not be wrong to call it a clear non-cooperation with intention not to be audited by the entity that is created by statute to hold the police accountable. Now, why now? Why has HIPOA been silent until now? I'm sure that is the next question you will ask. We have had challenges, just like many other institutions, of political goodwill. When we are talking about, you know, police is answerable direct to His Excellency, the President of the day. Therefore, the political goodwill is critical for us to be able to carry out our duties. The Cabinet Secretary responsible for that docket must also be firm enough, because he has an obligation under the NPS Act and other laws, to even the National Security Council Act, to be able to carry out supervisory role on the units and of the service, so that they can cooperate with us. The kind of work that we do is intrusive in nature, because we are monitoring somebody, or we're inspecting premises of an institution, a service that is licensed to use firearm, or by law they can use firearm, they can maintain law and order and so on. So that particular aspect is a challenge, or was a challenge. But right now, with the commitment of His Excellency the President, when we visited him on Monday in State House, he was very clear. He will not hold us, he will not stop us from doing what we must, and he will ensure he emphasizes on only holding the police accountable. Okay. How far that will go is still out there, but we believe that he's given direction, and we shall act on them, and we are up to the task.
All right. Now, you preempted my last question, so, but arising from what you've just said, is it necessary to have this political goodwill? Because it is called the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. Your power does not come from State House, it comes from the Constitution. But we get into that blue code of silence on the other side of this break.
Thank you.
Now, as much as watu hawana pesa wamedharau hizo shati za umse, what you're missing is ni hii shati ukivaa poa, mtu hawezi kosa kukupea compliment. Buda mazi, hiyo shati ni moto.
Like just because nimekusmailia, haimaanishi nakudai.
Mbona usound blended in the past place?
Because I'm a friendly person. Mimi niko friendly bena. Sasa nimekama hapa hivi nimekuhug.
Na wewe unathink nilikuwa nakungotea ndo tukue blend? Tunajua ngeni yangu na nitolea.
Sound engineer TikTok.
Nasivika mkono juu. Mi upenda na penda. Feeling on a success.
Future bright ndo we check labda dunge digaga za welding.
K2 Mix on NTV.
This is how we do it, this is how we get down. Niko shua hii utaiona. Mbona, sinilize mbona.
Discover the exciting world around the showbiz and celebrity news, the hottest mixes from top DJs, mind-blowing interviews on your favorite entertainment show, K2 Mix, only on NTV.
Do you know why they call me Sugar? It's because I bring the flavor, the heat, the spice, and the vibes on Kenyan radio. When a song plays on my show, it moves from being a hot song to a hit to a classic. When I interview you, you become a household name. And for every brand that advertises on this show, they move from being a brand to the brand. If you want to be seen, felt, and heard, you know where to be. This is the place. Every Monday to Friday on 96.3 Nation FM. It's the Nation FM Drive with yours truly, Anto, Neo, Soul. So kiss, mwah! Every other frequency, goodbye, and keep it right here, 96.3 Nation FM, where good music lives.
He threw 3 free throws.
He threw 3 free throws. He threw 3 free throws.
Wow, it's not as easy as it sounds.
He threw 3 throws. He threw 3 throws.
Let's dance together forever, forever.
Execute Plan Tango!
Holy guacamole!
What is the right time for children to watch television?
They should watch it during the weekends so that they may study well during the week.
Come on, come on! Be ready, get ready.
Next on Daring Abroad.
Logistics is not only moving products from point A to B.
How Bramex Limited, a Kenyan UK-based logistics company, is finding opportunities abroad for Kenyan businesses.
Trade missions are very critical elements in doing international trade. We have done a number in Dubai. We also had another one in March in the UK.
Also on the show, work and play experiences for investors of Center Marie residences at Two Rivers.
You can have your office here.
We have the kids play areas. We have parks.
This Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on NTV.
Protect the ones you love with the power of Dettol Bar Soap. It cleans and protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. So no matter what type of mum you are, trust Dettol.
Dettol celebrates Global Hand Washing Day.
A catchy tune that. Welcome back to AM Live. It signals we're on air, and we are. My two other panelists are in studio now as well. We have Diana Gishengo. She is the National Coordinator at the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA. Karibu sana.
Thank you very
Despite
much.
the rain, they've made it in. We also have Perpetua Kariuki, who is a human rights defender operating in Kayole. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope it wasn't too dampening, the weather.
No, no, no.
All right, good to see you all. I had several follow-up questions for yourself, Commissioner Muthaura, including why is it necessary to have political goodwill? Because your power is enshrined in law.
Yeah.
Why it does not come from the head of state, it does not come from State House?
All right. I think for policing generally to thrive, political goodwill is mandatory. It goes. It has a lot to funding. It has a lot to the commander-in-chief, who is responsible to ensure that the security of the buck stops with that office. Now, when we have proper funding, we have proper support or sufficient support, we have the relevant other agencies. Remember the National Security Council, it's chaired by the President. That council plays a supervisory role, meaning it can summon any of the commanders of any service, including KDF, NIS, and so on, and ask them to work together or to do ABCD. In terms of oversight in Kenya, this is our 10th year. Mm-hmm. We have had police for so many years, isn't it? Now, with a new entity checking the excesses of a service that has been in existence for so long, to be fully entrenched and be able to carry out your service or your functions properly, then you definitely need the support of other entities. In fact, even the own act that establishes IPOA recognizes the necessity to have that support. It emphasizes on support from all quarters, state and non-state actors. I'm happy to see the human rights defenders there, so that you're able to deliver because of the nature of work. The nature of work is where you're checking somebody who has never been checked at all, who has been operating, or entity that has been operating within, no checks, no confines, whatever. So I think His Excellency the President's position on this matter goes a long way in supporting what we do. I'm not actually saying that the previous regimes did not fully support, but some of these things, justice is something that you have to see it being done. It can't only be in paper. There are so many other provisions of the law that are existing that have never been implemented fully. For example, National Coroner Service Act. It has an impact in the oversight matters, the investigations that we do, the forensic labs that are there. We are relying on other entities. Yeah, we are relying on the same service that we oversight. So in essence, if we are to do proper investigation and also within the timelines that IPOA hopes that is done so that justice can be seen and done, then we are relying on the same entity that we are oversighting. Clearly, there is a challenge. So if we don't have His Excellency the President and the Cabinet Secretary responsible for Interior, for example, emphasizing on the necessity to have cooperation in carrying out these functions, then it will be impossible for us to offer meaningful oversight. Additionally, oversight is not about fault finding. Oversight is about asking you, don't go beyond this. This is what the law says. And therefore ensuring that there are checks and balances as you're carrying out your duties, so that you're not the law unto yourself. So you understand in this sector, cooperation is critical. There is no way we can have an investigation that is successful 100% without the support of the NPS. The IG has an obligation as well, because the officers we're investigating are under his command. Assuming the IG refuses or declines to give that particular officer authority to come and respond to summons. And most of these officers, they are in one station today. The next time you hear they're deployed elsewhere, or they are transferred in another place. So the only way to get hold of that particular officer who committed probably a crime or a misconduct in a certain region, the next thing you're hearing is in Lamu. How do we get hold of this officer? He cannot just desert. He has to get proper permission and authorization through the relevant chain of command to come and appear. So you see why cooperation, collaboration, partnership is critical for us to do this. Political goodwill, I think there are things I may not be able to say, but it's so critical in oversight. And actually all constitutional commissions need that, because our nature of work is that which holding other entities accountable, checking them and reporting. There is also one thing, you can keep on reporting, but those reports are not being actioned. You need the direction of the government of the day, the agenda. What is the government of the day agenda? Are they willing to have that particular matter taken to the next level, or is it one of those that is not a priority? Remember, from regime to regime, there's agendas, their manifestos, their issues keep changing. So some of them we continue, others may vary from time to time. So we think that's a very critical issue, and for us, we have seen it affecting how we worked the last 3 years or so.
Okay, and so now the question then becomes, okay, so what can we do to ensure cooperation, and what do we need to do moving forward in terms of resources that IPOA would need, and we'll get into that. But still on the subject of restoring public confidence in the criminal justice system, another reason, in my view, it's been shaken is because of these cases, that high-profile cases that were withdrawn by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We saw the Law Society of Kenya say they want to review these files, and they posed two questions. Either, that is before they had a change of mind after meeting with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, with the DPP, I beg your pardon, Director of Public Prosecutions, Nuruddin Haji. And but this is the situation they posed, Diana, that either these charges were politically instigated, or that the withdrawal was also political. What did you make of all of it?
To be honest, I am currently very worried, because the withdrawals, particularly for a number of economic crimes, the case of the Kenya Power directors, the case of the CS, Aisha Jumwa, I think there's also been a withdrawal of the Public Service Commission reinstating the Vice Chancellor, Masai Mara University. And part of the reasoning of the ODPP is that DCI has withdrawn the evidence. But the person responsible constitutionally for charging people, telling people to commence investigation, analyzing whether a file, whether from IPOA, EACC, or DCI, has the weight for prosecution, is the ODPP. When they withdraw, the first person who should be held responsible is the DPP, in person and all the other officials. Because it's now not clear whether we are putting aside some cases because of the current dispensation, and there are no guarantees that moving forward we will be more objective and focus and not litigate new political vendetta for the incoming regime. Okay, incoming out, it's never clear. So that's a very worrying concern, and I wish the Law Society had probed a little bit more, and we are hoping that the judiciary will take up its role, that you can't just withdraw a matter. There must be reasons for it. And as TISA and members of Okwa Uchumi, we've written to the ODPP requesting for information. What is this that has triggered a change of mind? Because these are cases that people have followed. And we're only focusing on the ODPP. Asset recovery had recovered billions. Are we going to see a recession, them receding all the actions that they had taken? Are we getting back to a situation where all our independent institutions are now, it's not clear whether they're becoming independent or they are dancing to the new political tune? It is not, and it is disheartening, and it's even causing anxiety. Does our justice system really work?
Tumbo joto.
Yeah, yeah, yo.
And it's the DPP. This is the DPP's case. The argument he made the other day. He sat down with Sophia Wanuna of KTN, and he said the way that he has sought to cure that. So he says, first of all, when some of these charges were preferred, they did not have those guidelines in place, those decision to charge guidelines. And he said he took it in good faith when the DCI presented their cases. He said he did not expect then to have senior officers in court withdrawing their statements, saying they were under coercion. So he said he took it in good faith, like our Commissioner Mudaura here is saying. He said it was a learning curve for him, that it was under a gentleman's agreement that I will trust that you will seal these gaps in the case. What do you make of that argument?
Now I'm even more perturbed, because this is Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Right there, the mandate is Article 157 of the Constitution. Not good faith, not gentleman agreement. There is a constitution, whether they are guidelines or not. Even IPOA are developing guidelines, but they have been working even without, because the letter and the spirit of the Constitution, especially for the ODPP, is extremely clear. What happens when holders of independent offices keep relying on good faith, gentleman agreement? What are we supposed to make of the long process that happened since '92? The peak of it was 2007, when we decided we must get 2008 onward, when we decided we must make institutional reforms. What becomes of that if all that thinking, the laws, he has a whole legislation that has been there since 2013. That particular office has very, very competent people to check on the documents that come in and whether a case merits. Remember, these cases were not only taken to court, they were publicized. We were entertained on Twitter, on Facebook, with press statements, surely. You cannot run away from responsibility, and this even speaks to the issue of leadership and integrity of our independent offices. If it was a gentleman's agreement, it is below the bar. of what the Constitution requires, and the honorable thing to do is to allow somebody who believes in the Constitution to now take leadership. The ODPP, in my opinion, therefore, should not be using Kenyans' time and taxpayers' money explaining a gentleman's agreement. He should now be saying, I should have stuck to the Constitution. And it's almost an admission of culpability. It may be a learning curve, but it is too costly, a learning curve. Because think about it. If it is true that these people were coerced and there were no safeguards within investigating mechanism to deal with that, they will withdraw. All these people will come after taxpayers' money for compensation, defamation, and all that. That is too high a price. Thereafter, the next person who will be arrested, we will debate first, is this political? Is it real that they are offenders? Soon, there will be apathy and lethargy to engage with the judicial system. What happens? We will quickly go into anarchy. And whereas I am encouraged that Kenya Kwanza has said they will respect independent institutions as per the Constitution, this is something we are waiting to see because, say, the NPS is supposed to be independent, but now there is a chief administrator, the accounting officer has been appointed by the president. That surely doesn't feel like independence entirely. So if you think about it, the statements by Kenya Kwanza and His Excellency the President are encouraging. If we can allow all institutions to work as per the constitutional mandate, they speak out, they take their reports either to the executive or to parliament, and where necessary even to the judiciary, we'll move closer. But for now, we are eroding confidence in our accountability mechanism and our justice system, and it is too costly.
Okay. Perpetua, it seems at the heart of this is, again, the police. What was happening at the DCI when we're having, because they are now senior officers are now coming to say, you know, we're told we have to finish this investigation in very tight timelines and just proceed and charge. When you hear such statements, I mean, when you read such reports in the dailies, what do you make of them? Does it dent your confidence in the justice system, in the criminal justice system?
It's sad. First of all, I was surprised by the statement by Commissioner Muthaura that they didn't know about the SSU existence. So when we started the Social Justice Centers Working Group back in 2018, it was specifically because of the killings in our communities. And
which communities are these?
The informal settlement, Kayole, Dandora, Mathare, name them, the ghetto. So, and it's because of these killings of young men that we started the movement. And the first demonstration that we did on 7th of July 2018, the Sabasaba March for Our Lives, was to condemn these killings, to denormalize these killings in our communities. So when we hear that the Independent Policing Oversight Authority doesn't have a record or doesn't know the existence of SSU since before 2018, because these killings were normalized by the community. And most of the people in the social justice centers are actually victims, yeah, and survivors of these killings, of these atrocities and brutality. It is sad because case like Mathare Social Justice Center, there was a killer cop called Tyson in 2017. So Mathare Social Justice Center started in 2015, and they started documenting these cases and referring them to these bodies. And when we came together from all those informal settlements in 2018, we had documented cases and taken them to IPOA, thinking these people serve the people directly. They're not the police, they're working for us, the public, you see? And we depend on the investigation to make sure that these police are held accountable. So That statement really made me really question myself why I take cases to IPOA and why they don't take the next step. Now, I've gotten a kind of a confirmation why our cases in IPOA don't go nowhere. Because we have cases that are old as 4 years, 5 years since we started, and they're still stuck at the IPOA in the name of investigations.
Do you have any specific instances, perhaps, that the commissioner?
So we have a case of police inaction. Police took 2 young men from the house, so the neighbors knew they were arrested to be taken to the police station, only to be taken where their parents live, and then handcuffed and let by the community to deal with them. So they killed them in the eyes of the police.
Where was this?
In Kayole.
And when was this?
Matopeni Spring Valley. This was in June 2016.
And you reported this to IPOA?
No, 2019, sorry. Yes. And we reported, and it was under investigation. And then after following up with the investigator that was in charge of that case, he told me without, I didn't really know, it was just the follow-up, the way we follow up with the investigators from IPOA, that he had been transferred to Eldoret. And I had to ask now, what will happen? Who has this case? And then he gave me another investigator. And they had to start afresh after me following up. And they have done the investigations, and they have concluded, actually, and they're yet to start arresting the perpetrators.
Okay. Maybe
Commissioner.
Right of reply. Perpetual, probably it's good that we get facts clear. When I say existence of SSU, it is not an indication that SSU was involved with the killings of 2018, as you're mentioning. There may be many other formations, units that with different names from time to time, as may be established by the service. So you cannot particularly, unless you're clear, you know the membership of SSU, and this particular person was wearing a badge of SSU, and you understand. So when we investigate individual police officers. Now, when we are carrying out an inspection and audit or review of a unit, that is when we are trying to target the command level, because you can't charge criminal responsibility is in person. You cannot collectively charge everybody because of an offense of a particular officer. Now, starting from that point, the case that you have indicated about police inaction, remember that the aspect that IPOA will investigate is the point of arresting these 2 officers, which you rightfully have indicated we investigated. So the only thing that hasn't happened is the particular person or the officers involved being arraigned in court and charged with the offense of inaction and so on. We do this, we investigate, which we have done. We recommend to the Director of Public Prosecution to prefer charges in court. That is where our mandate ends. So if the DPP concurs with our recommendation, then he will definitely charge those officers. To date, the DPP has not taken action. IPOA is blamed. And that is why we are saying if we had proper resources, and I'll go back to your question of the challenges that you think should be mitigated to enable the authority to perform better. Let me assure Perpetual that we investigate all our cases. All our cases. Now, there are challenges in investigation, one of which I mentioned, the blue code of silence, non-cooperation, transfers, as you're indicating, both from ourselves and in fact, not ours, is known. Even where an officer is transferred, we work in teams. So definitely there will be other investigators who will be left continuing with that particular case. So there is no disconnect, even when we transfer an officer. But the service, an officer who is transferred, as I indicated, the way to have that particular person followed up for purposes of record, statement recording, and so on, it also involves that particular command. So I would kindly request you today or any other time, I will share with you my contact, to share with me the cases that are pending in Kayole at the moment, and I'll give you a stated update of all of them. The other issue I would kindly request is involvement of witnesses. You see, perception is everything. When you come to us, and probably it takes a little bit longer, because as indicated earlier, this system is not about IPOA alone. When we for example, where there's a discharge of, firearm and so on, we rely on other entities for ballistics, for what report. So in essence, we will be able to inform you how far we have reached on this particular matter, what are the hurdles, and how best we can mitigate them. I have issues of safety of witnesses and victims. When in IPOA, we engage the witness protection for purposes of vulnerable witnesses. We have done that to ensure. Now, what I think is the issue of accessibility. We would actually want to come all the way to the ground and be able to engage you. But the resources allocated to us is only enough to pay staff. Yet our work is the kind of, you have to go to the people so that we can get the trust, we can be able to engage. Most of our victims and actually those in informal settlement have real issues. Even having fare to come to our institution is a challenge. We ought to be able to be facilitated to reimburse them and so on. So I want to kindly request you to change your perception completely with regard to the authority. It's not that we didn't know it exists. The units are there. They have been created, different units. Some of them only have a term of less than 1 month, 2 months, depending on the nature of crimes or the TORs that they're supposed to execute. There are those that are known are standing units that have been existing for many years, like the border patrols and whatnot. Those ones have been there for ATPU and so on. They've been there and we know they exist. And that is why we have carried out audit and inspections of those units, 109 of those units that are known by statute and also the standing orders. The ones that are created haphazardly, some of them we don't know under which circumstances, and that is why the other day I was telling His Excellency the President, probably the National Security Council should have a final say on the creation of these units. Actually, the ones that are created from time to time without proper procedure. The role of the CS in creation of units, for example. We need to be, if we want the National Police Service to be transparent and to be held accountable as required by Article 244 of the Constitution, then there has to be free flow of information. Otherwise, how else do you hold these entities accountable? We must have some level of transparency in the creation, the process, and so on of those units that exist. Now, let's go to the challenges of IPOA. I've mentioned issues of resources.
And we'll get to that, because also I have a question. Would it help to be embedded within the National Police Service? Because for now, it looks like you're on the outside looking in, and even as you're on the outside looking in, they've closed the curtains. Yeah. Okay, so Diana, if I could bring you in at this point, but in terms of these excesses by police, you already have the DPP himself saying he felt intimidated, he felt he was treated as a second-class citizen, and he talked about events that transpired at his own home. Does that inspire any confidence in you? If the DPP, because he said as a person of my stature, he is Somali, and he said these authorities turned their guns on him, so to speak. And he said, if a person of my stature can feel like I'm being treated like a second-class citizen, then what about Perpetua here?
Definitely, it becomes very, very worrying that somebody... you start with his Somali, but Nordin Haji has worked in both the judicial and security sector, okay? So he's not even an outsider to the level of Perpetua, or even my level, okay? I should be worried how I get home after this particular show. But definitely, if that intimidation happened to that level, what then are we saying about our institution and other safeguards? Because, for instance, the ODPP is mandated and has some powers. He may have been intimidated directly, but he has ways of, he can file a whole report, okay? And you see, one of the worrying things, and I don't know whether that's the politics of it, is that he's only speaking about it now, yet even at the point of instituting these matters, he was intimidated, okay? He never spoke about it. Is there a report that was filed? That's police excesses with the IPOA. Was there something that was filed with Parliament that the office of the ODPP is not able to effectively carry out their mandate because of police interference? That way we get to a higher level of oversight and protection. So the question is our policing that problematic and rogue that even the most influential people, the only way they cope is by being co-opted? Okay? So what's the next style of co-option? Even as we disband SSU, what has been created? Because the history of policing in this country, since pre-independence, independences, there has always been killer squads. Most recently, we've disbanded Flying Squad, Reke, and so on. New ones, sorry, not Reke, Kwekwe. New ones have emerged. We only know of SSU. Is it because that they did some work that crossed somebody who had power to state it? And therefore, other squads that are still existing and are unknown, have quote-unquote political blessings, are still able to operate. For the corruption cases that TISA is active around, remember how most of the people would be arrested. And there was even, we used to call them what Fridays?
Kamata Fridays.
Kamata Fridays. So Thursday you needed to know whether you need to run. It is a way of ensuring you're humiliated enough, your dignity is taken away, your right to a speedy trial is taken away by being kamatwad on Friday, and then Monday they decide if your file is heavy. By the time we take you to court and you get your bail or bond is Tuesday, okay? How comes nobody raised that issue as an issue of inquiry? Why did we enjoy, that is the people who were in office, DCI, ODPP, EACC, why did we take that particular tack, knowing very well it wasn't right? Now imagine somebody who was arrested through Kamata, then all the people who were part of Kamata used their Subarus to crisscross this country from one area to the other, then they say, I was under pressure. Clearly, if you look back, there is a trend that shows it doesn't look the natural way of justice. Commissioner Muthaura is saying, for them, they will collect. They don't have Subarus. Right now, they are Hyundais and Volkswagens, okay, that crisscross this country. What level of interference was there? What pressures were this? And is it time that we immediately have now an independent inquiry? I think we need to urgently have an independent inquiry into politically instigated investigations. Okay? Were they completely devoid of evidence? Why did they exist? How can we safeguard? And I'm not entirely sure that the CS incorporating the Cabinet Secretary for Interior into this process would strengthen the process, because in my view, that particular ministry was largely the conduit for the interference, the political orders, and there has been tensions between the national government administration and the police. The design and architecture of police reforms was supposed to be very, very independent. That way, we summon through, remember there is IPOA, and there is the National Police Service Commission, which is supposed to be responsible for oversighting the day-to-day and the personnel. There's a commission to NPS. Then there is the IG, an independent office that ought to report to NPS, the Commander-in-Chief, and Parliament. But because of the architecture, they still get orders from the CS, okay, against the initial design. Is it time we have a very candid discussion and check what really works for our country under the current circumstances? And that may start off with the CS Interior. When CS Treasury is cornered by the World Bank, by the IMF, we must see action that there are no more pilferages, you're dealing with corruption, and they decide we must get a few people, okay? We are going for this governor, this former speaker, and so and so. Again, optics and political interference, where do we get our safeguards? I think the recent statement by various office holders are very, very worrying. And the only way to heal this is to rise and create a higher form of accountability. And I think it's time, and as civil society will start that call of a comprehensive audit and inquiry and a reconstitution of some of these key offices, okay? Because it's, I'm not sure whether the CEO, EACC, will also come and say, I am now very worried for my life. I prosecuted these cases because of politics, or I prosecuted them genuinely, investigated them and handed them over genuinely, but now it is alleged that I was malicious or politically driven. How do we safeguard our institution? I think that's very, very critical. And this show, I'm imagining myself, my village people, the Social Justice Center, they are so worried that this is the rot that we have brought to our judicial, our criminal justice system, our accountability mechanism. It is sad, it is, it's just wrong.
Okay. And Commissioner, I'll come to you. It's just that, Perpetua, I'd like also to give you a chance to respond to what the Commissioner said. But before then, Diana, something that has come to mind, because you say that somebody needs to be held accountable. You're saying in this instance, the buck stops with the DPP. The DPP says he had a conversation with the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. He says he wishes things were different. And he says him sticking to his guns eventually is what led to that Cold War. You know, they had this back and forth between himself and the office of the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti. And he said him saying that I have the final word on who is charged is what led to that Cold War between the two offices. He says he wrote, in the case of Ben Chumo, you raised it here, Kenya Power, and 4 times, and nothing was forthcoming. So can you really, do you think in good conscience, he should, what do you say? You talked about some of these, reconstituting some of these offices. Do you think, do you still maintain that perhaps we need to look at the leadership of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions?
I still hold, and I commend that he raised it with the head of the executive, okay? One of the other forms of accountability and redress that he had, and he still has both, and from the Constitution, is Parliament as well. A report to Parliament would also have been a plus, because if there is a fallout with the executive, the people who oversight the executive is Parliament. So he still had very, very many avenues. And remember, we are learning about all this now, and it's now playing in the public gallery. Trust and confidence in public institution, its perception, okay? And leadership and integrity is about perception. The minute people are no longer confident that Olive runs this show, no amount of explanation can restore that confidence immediately. There must be a process to restore. And the current holder of the current DPP has done his fair share of good work there, okay? But because of the confidence crisis and the questioning, I would imagine that he owes a responsibility to Kenya, to the office that he holds, that we do not falter in our confidence. And building that confidence is by inviting people, come, find out. I had a conversation with the former president. How do we ensure my successor does not fall into the same pitfalls? He leads us into that process. I think he will have served this country better than the holding of I did my best, I was even a victim, and so on. For that, I celebrate him, but he had more avenues. This is a public process. Let us now take it to where we can engage the public the most.
All right. So we need to take a break, but I did promise Perpetua and Commissioner Muthaura. When we come back, I'll get your thoughts on how to restore public confidence in the criminal justice system. See you on the other side.
It is that time of the year again, when we gather to celebrate excellence. The Women in Business Awards 2022 will be held at the Nairobi Serena Hotel on the 4th of November. The awards will start at 5 p.m. Individual tickets are 10,000 shillings for non-members and 7,000 shillings for members. A corporate table of 10 goes for 80,000 shillings and exhibition goes for 150,000 shillings. Join us in celebrating women and the men that make this possible.
Weeks after a new directive by Kenya's President William Ruto reverted all imported sea cargo clearing services back to this port city of Mombasa, shipping lines are now busy filling in new orders to lease or sell containers as demand rises. I'm here to find out what this means for the country's economy.
I'm driving down a busy Johannesburg road, and we're currently at stage 6 of the load shedding. And as you can see, it's quite dark. The traffic lights aren't operational, and basically all the light that we're seeing right now is coming from other cars. And it's quite a sad indictment of the current state that South Africa currently faces as a result of this consistent and persistent power cuts.
New Sensodyne Repair and Protect with Deep Repair. It's a huge game changer for me. The science is pretty amazing because it really goes deep inside the tooth and repairs tooth sensitivity. It's going to improve the quality of my life in a big way.
In your paper this week, General Muhoozi continues to show defiance. No serving army officer has enjoyed the latitude of opinion and freedom without any sanction, as President Museveni's son has. Ruto's rich ministers to push pro-poor policies, plus our opinion leaders. Let's take a hard look at the breeds and maybe learn a thing or two. Generali Ulimwengu. Are East African community leaders interested in having Uganda crude oil refined here? Joachim Buembo. Presidency is like booze. Stay too long, you won't ever want to leave. Charles Onyango Obo. Magazine. Status and Power. Royal Women show how to protect Zulu King. For this and more stories, get your copy of the East African.
All right, you're watching AM Live this morning with my ladies on my panel. We are discussing how do we restore public confidence in the criminal justice system. And Perpetua, given your experience, you say in the informal settlements in Nairobi, this is a persistent problem, so much so that you formed the social justice centers. Was it not shocking to you to read reports about bodies being pulled out of River Yala, bodies being pulled out of River Tana?
Well, not really, because that's something that has been happening. It's only that after the Social Justice Center campaigning, also we have partners, NGOs, Amnesty, IJM, TISA. We work with, under the Missing Voices, also partners in the Missing Voices. So we have seen this trend So when Ribayala happened, we had other cases also that were not solved, that were not talked about, you see. So, and we have tried having dialogues in the communities and bringing these bodies together, including IPOA, and they come. And the problem is that they don't say these challenges that they're facing at their office. They instill the confidence of the community that they're going to solve these cases, that they're going to investigate these cases. Because when I document a case, this family of victim will definitely question me. Where did my case go? What is the update? Do we have follow-up? Who is investigating this? I need updates. What is happening? Why am I not getting justice? Why is my case not reaching the courtrooms, you see? So through the partnership that we have had several dialogues. And the biggest one happened in February 2019 when the ODPP, the DCI, the IPOA, all those security bodies came at Kayole. And they heard from the community themselves. Actually, even they didn't meet us, the justice centers. They didn't even know us. They knew that they were invited by the International Justice Mission to do a dialogue at the community. But they had stories. And DCI was actually, DCI then, Kinoti, was very surprised. And he assured the community he has been a victim of police brutality. He has been shot 21 times. Yes, that's what he said. And he said he's going to stop those killings. He said that he's going to work with the justice centers. He's going to work with the security bodies to make sure that investigations are done and these police are prosecuted. But ever since, no feedback from those cases that they took. They're still in the ODPP. And actually, surprisingly, those cases got lost and they had to come back to Kayole to ask us if we can trace the cases that we gave them. So please, the confidence of the citizens is, again.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up for the Commissioner response.
Yes.
The social justice centers, do you feel that there was a gap? You were not feeling IPOA, you were not feeling the National Police Service Commission, and therefore as a community, you resorted to yourselves. Was that what informed their formation?
Absolutely. When we formed the justice centers, we had most of us, we had zero knowledge of the mandates of IPOA, IAU. Where are they, like, where do their mandate reach? You see, when IPOA does the investigation, they go to the ODPP to see if the investigation was done well. If it has gaps, they are taken back. They're back and forth and all that. We didn't know about that really, but still, the only transparency is very important. If you're facing a challenge and you're the one serving us, even our parents, when we were young, you will tell a parent to buy you something, and she'll tell you she doesn't have the money, and we wouldn't believe it because you are mandated to provide for me. So if IPOA comes to the ground and tells the community that we're going to follow up these cases, and the community believes that, yes, the justice centers are doing work and they have taken our case to IPOA and they're going to follow up, and then IPOA goes back to their offices and they keep quiet, and then it has to take me, a HRD, to follow up with them, which sometimes even when we go to IPOA offices and when they're taking statements of the victim and the witnesses, sometimes you're not allowed in to make sure that the statement that it has been written, recorded, is the right statement sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes, because we have had cases of statements being misquoted or miswritten to mean something else. You see, so if as the HRD really, the community thinks that because we have a justice center and we have all these partners working with us, they assume that we have the powers to also investigate these cases with the IPOA, but they don't know. The only thing we do is just take statement, identify these witnesses. We don't take statements, we take from IJ to IPOA or IAU, and also we have worked closely with IJM, who also have private investigators who also follow up with the witnesses and take their own statements, just to share and cross-check with the IPOA and the bodies that we have given the cases.
So when you say HRD, you mean Human Rights Defender? For
yes,
those defenders. For those who might just be joining us. And so you're saying you document the cases?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner.
Let me appreciate first the human rights defenders, civil society generally, and development partners for the support they've afforded us, especially in reaching out to the informal settlement, taking of statement, securing witness attendance, and so on. There's a lot of partnership and collaboration. I think isolated cases like the one she has mentioned, where the verification of what is in the statement and so on was not done correctly, probably that if shared with me, I'll be able to follow up and so on. Now, let me go to the issue that was raised. And I'm not defending the DPP, but this is probably the challenge that we also encountered. And she questions that, why are you coming out now to say, why didn't you say that time? The Constitution and the law requires state officers to carry themselves in a certain manner. The conduct of state officers is regulated under Chapter 6 and other documents. Some of them are published and not, others not. Government works in a very unique way. Hardly are government officers out here speaking out on what is happening. That, of course, is not an excuse. There are channels of how to engage different entities. For example, IPOA has made, and I'm sure it's on record, we have never met His Excellency, the former president, who appointed us. Yet we had concerns that we thought would have been best addressed by himself. Not that we didn't make attempts. We made several attempts through the then cabinet secretary. It never happened. Why? Because, you know, getting an appointment to see the His Excellency, the president, is not just a walk in the park too. We made several, not attempts, but real physical meetings with the departmental committee that is responsible to matters of internal security. And all that we raised were issues of non-cooperation, challenges that we encountered. And you, earlier on, you did indicate, I need to mention a few challenges. IPOA officers are not, they don't carry firearms. We rely on the security, and our safety is actually the responsibility of National Police Service, the very entity that we are oversighting. You see the risk, and the kind of sensitive cases that we are investigating, most of them range from deaths, serious injuries that are committed or allegedly committed by those officers. We are exposed. We have made requests for resources to enable us devolve our services to ensure accessibility, so that even if it's an issue like now where reaching out to our witnesses and victims, it becomes a challenge. We haven't been able to. This institution has only less than 300 officers, oversighting over 100,000 police officers spread throughout the Republic. If indeed there is goodwill, it is to resource this institution properly and adequately to enable it to execute its function. By the way, we have only done or implemented a handful, very few sections of our mandate, yet we have a lot of other functions that we are required to do. Why aren't we able to do that? Because we are not funded adequately to be able to carry out this kind of whatever. We have also challenges of the law. We have IPOA carrying out investigation, conflict of the law. We have internal affairs carrying out investigation. We have NPS, that is KPS, carrying out investigation, and we have DCI carrying out investigation. The overlap in terms of mandate affects our effectiveness. So we went to Parliament, advanced our issues, our challenges, the necessity to amend the law to ensure that the law is clearer. We are able to carry out our mandate without interference. Where the Constitution says police must be oversighted by a civilian entity, let it be a civilian independent entity, not only in letter, but also in spirit. In essence, we were talking about clarity in law to ensure that if a matter is supposed to be for IPOA, let IPOA deal with it to its logical conclusion. Now, right now, we have files from all corners. All of them lands to the DPP, all of them requesting for different course of action. Now, That is a challenge for us. We went to that committee to express ourselves. What happened? We all know that at some point institutions clearly were not functional. Oversight by National Assembly was not as meaningful as it ought to be. So I think for us coming out at this moment, we are not coming out to accuse or to just to lay allegations so that we try to exonerate ourselves from blame. No, we are all equally to blame, or all institutions ought to comply with the law. Implement the laws, the respective laws. Carry out your mandates in the manner that is required by the Constitution. The people too have an obligation. The people have an obligation to hold the electorate, because they are the ones who eventually audit us. They are the ones who asked us, why haven't you done ABCD? Because we report to Parliament. The removal process, for example, my removal process, you have to show that I violated whatever law, and it's Parliament, it's a parliamentary process at the end of it all. So if Parliament is not exercising oversight, don't blame the institution alone. Let us work together. Let us all have the synergy to ensure that we are serving the same people and in the correct manner. All arms of government, the executive, do not interfere with the work of independent institutions. Independent institution, letter and spirit, implementation of your acts. If it's to hold police accountable, do it and do it meaningfully. Because at the end of the day, not all police officers are engaged in atrocities. It's just a few. Now, in terms of the role of civil society, colleagues in the panel here today, the civil society, for some reason, just went quiet. They were no longer holding the state institutions to account to the people, yet they are the ones who are actually required to do it. Now, when, for example, the blanket condemnation, and that's why I'm saying we investigate, like the cases mentioned here, I wish today Perpetua would have come with the cases. I'll be able to respond. I have data here that this case is this far and so on and so forth. So I think, to me, let's be objective in the way we are criticizing, not blanket condemnation, but let's also point out areas of improvement. Now, there was a question of removing and reconstituting these offices. There are no angels out there. At the end of the day, if things are not changed, the way things have been happening aren't changed, even the person who comes will definitely suffer the same challenges. So when we are pointing out challenges like we are doing today, we are bashed. We are told, where were you? Why didn't you raise these issues? We did raise through the relevant channels, because the nature of our work, we are not supposed to sensationalize issue. You have actually complained that DCI was over sensationalizing the cases that he was investigating, and eventually the ones that are arraigned in court and so on. That is not how we operate. We operate in a different way, because we have a service so sensitive that police is so critical to the people of Kenya, so critical to the development of this country, so critical to the economy of this country. If we were to come out and bash police just because we can bash the police, then clearly that would be very, very wrong. We will be compromising the safety and security of many Kenyans, innocent. The other day when the CS was being interviewed, he said 99 will not suffer because of 1%. And it's something that we need to appreciate. Now, I think issues of the service, you have to accept that we cannot come out and mostly share so much information, especially because of the kind of victims we are also dealing with, witnesses we are dealing with, who may be subjected to exposed, and eventually you can imagine what would happen, assuming that. You asked me a question on why we should be embedded in the NPS, probably because we over-reliance on some of this. In fact, the opposite should be true. The Constitution under Article 239, 5 and 6, it says all security organs, not only the National Police Service, but all security organs are subject to civilian authority. How do you subject this institution to civilian authority? You must have an entity comprised of civilians like myself and you, who are supposed to check what those officers are doing, hold them accountable, and report to Parliament and the President and so on behalf of Wanjiku. Now, NIS has its own committee that is supposed to hold it accountable, and Kenya Defence Forces, it's supposed to be done through the Defence Council, and of course the role of the CS and PS and so on. Now, IPOA cannot be embedded by Constitution. It has to be extremely independent. The word independent is dependent on so many other factors. In investigation, we are independent, but we are still part of the government. We are funded from the government coffers. We are reporting the government structures. You realize we are still a government entity, but carrying out an independent function. So nobody would say that has interfered with investigation on how we are going on with the investigation. Other than non-cooperation, our investigations are rather straightforward and so on. So we want to assure you that in terms of investigation, they will go on as ought to be done. Now, there are challenges that would cause delays here and there. The issue of non-cooperation, the issue of witnesses not coming forth, inaccessibility, funds. For example, right now we have a budget cut of 100 million. That is money that was meant for investigators. Investigators to move from point A to B, investigators to reach out to Perpetual for purposes of doing this and that. We do rapid responses. We monitor, for example, the operation down in Pokot, and so on. How do you do those things without funds? Then it becomes a challenge. So those can actually delay the investigation. Those that we're able to fast track, and by the way, when we came on board, we had such a huge backlog. So far, we have cleared so much and recommended them to the Director of Public Prosecution. Director of Public Prosecution, as was rightfully indicated, just doesn't agree with our recommendation. He too has his own structures of quality assurance, ensuring that investigation that we have, or the file that we have submitted to him meets the threshold for purposes of prosecution. The guidelines are also there on meeting. So for us, none of our cases has been brought, or officers have been charged in court without the DPP having to go through. For example, you mentioned the case of Rashid and other people. In fact, DPP last week assured us that he's going to have him charged. And the baby Pendo, we also investigated that baby Pendo and recommended an inquest, which the DPP agreed with us. It has taken some time, you know, when it happened, but as it stands right now, we have a possibility of those officers being arraigned in court, at least for closure. And for the first time, we have now command responsibility issues being put in place. Now, we do not arrest. So, for example, when the DPP agrees with our issue, he refers back the file to us and asks for those people to be brought to court. Who is supposed to ensure that is done? Arresting police officers? The Inspector General of Police. Now, the delays and the different actors in this whole process is probably eventually everybody blames IPOA, but it's not really IPOA. So I think we agree. In terms of function, she did indicate that we are not known. We have no budget for outreach. Completely. We rely on your goodwill. When you invite us here, we're able to share a little bit of what we do. And you know, the time, in fact, most of the time I'm feeling like probably you should give me more time so that I'm able to say what we do, how you can engage us, and so on. The truth is that we also have a responsibility to ensure reforms in the service. We are not there to find and to punish police officers. We are there to ensure the dialogue of reforms is sustained in the National Police Service. That's why we do inspection of detention facility and police premises. We have recommended issues of welfare and so on. Now, one challenge, and let me just, because I know you might not come back to me, there is the issue of uptake of recommendations of IPOA, uptake of decisions of the court. The court has awarded quite a number of victims compensation and so on. That, in millions, they have never been paid, or has never been honored by the National Police Service. So we are hoping now that the Inspector General has been made the accounting officer, and of course the new development with the new principal secretary, that is something else, a gray area there. We hope that he'll be able to take ownership, because the NPS Act is very clear on matters of compensation. In fact, it obligates IPOA to assist victims, not assist in terms of cost, but in terms of records, information, to ensure that they're able to lodge a civil case in court and be able to get damages for this and that. The court has made a decision in Monsoon case in Mombasa, Justice Ogol, and there was an indication that we have all holding facilities, because the deaths that occur in holding facilities and lock-up facilities, detention facility, we can actually reduce them by almost 100% if we had installed CCTV or surveillance systems that are accountable and verifiable in all these stations. That is a decision of the court, has never been implemented. I know, of course, it has a huge cost implication, but I think it's something that can be pursued with even partnership, private-public partnership. If the state is willing indeed to have real police reforms, we must insist and purpose to deal with that. We have made so many recommendations, so many. I can assure you, if you just look into our website, you will see so many reports that we have done. Issues of welfare of police officers is critical to us. I'm sure it will appear that we are only targeting them and charging them and so on. But we have raised concerns with regard to their housing, which was taken partially. Now we are doing a follow-up to ensure that integration of police officers in the community, what is the situation, how we can deal with this. There is the issue of units that we have audited. For example, the ones that are in far areas like the border patrol and so on. Those officers are the most miserable officers. Most of them suffer even depression because of not being able to be transferred within the timelines that ought to be transferred, or a lack of a proper transfer structure. Some of those officers are actually suffering. And we have recommended that certain consideration, actually for the ones who are in those far areas and suffering certain challenges. And with that, the NPSC was able to establish a counseling facility. We also have some form of counseling, but to only officers that have been charged, and victims and witnesses and so on. So we have made quite a number. Even recommendation to have the elderly, or not elderly, but officers who have reached 50 years and above to be transferred to, their home areas or local areas, so that they are able to slowly integrate themselves back into the society and so on. We are talking about mental health of police officers. It's a critical issue for IPOA. We have recommended that and many others. So uptake is a challenge. Uptake requires goodwill. Uptake requires resources. Uptake requires synergy in its implementation, and that is how we deal with that particular issue. I think for me, the system, because it's not only about the police, let's also address their welfare, their remuneration, and so on and so forth, so that we're able to work together and have them carry out their duties the way they ought, and we hold them accountable. The few who have challenges, we should be able to deal with them. And when they are required to come to the IPOA, they should be able to cooperate. We have provisions that require or that can enforce their attendance to court or compel them to obey. But why would we want to take police officers to court every day? Actually, senior leadership to court every day so that they comply. I think by virtue of their being state officers, they should be able to comply with our recommendations and so on. So I think it's to call upon even the command level to be committed to reforms. Okay. So that we do not have this discussion every other day and so on. Yeah.
All right. And that was quite impassioned. I didn't want to cut you short because I was learning so much as you were speaking. And now I will come back to you in a few moments. But some of what you preempted again, some of my questions, including where does IPOA begin, IAU, that is the Internal Affairs Unit of the Police, and the National Police Service Commission, where does one begin and the other end? Yes. Which I think you've addressed, that you raised that issue with Parliament, that the law needs to be looked at to provide that clarity. But also you talked about transfers being a problem where you're investigating an officer. And it did come up in one of our reports. Ngina Kiruri did a report titled Aiding and Abetting a Police Officer Who Took a Six-Figure Bribe to Release an Illegal Immigrant. And of course, there were security concerns that was raised as a result of that. And she did a report on Saturday where he was transferred. And so the question is, or remains, what action has been taken? So is there a protocol when a complaint has been made against an officer, you have found that indeed there is a case to answer? Is there a protocol? Because this gentleman was recorded on camera. There is evidence. Is there a protocol for, okay, so a complaint has been made, then should they be suspended from duty until they're cleared, or what happens there? And I'll allow you to answer that. But she raised the question for you as well, Diana. She asked, if we reconstitute some of these offices, which angels are these that you expect to occupy them?
Okay. First, I want to commend that IPOA, by the time they come to us, they're saying, go to our website, we raised this concern. Go to the Hansard, we raised this concern. So by the time we are moving to a conversation, they will have covered their ground. My first response is, there is no way, as Kenyans, we should accept that government institutions are helpless. If they become helpless, it is time to reconstitute government. Government agencies cannot be helpless. We have donated to them our power. If there is a helpless, let them come back to us and re-seek our power. And I think that is why there's a very strong push. We must do an audit and an inquiry. Because if all agencies are now alleging there was interference, I did this under pressure, I was intimidated, so you moved from the required standards of your office, okay? Maybe it's just a matter of time before judicial officers also tell us, I issued this order under pressure, under a gentleman's agreement that this was the best thing for this country. The minute that happens, that you have allowed yourself to move from the rule of law to other mechanics and processes, you have brought disrepute to that office. The honorable thing to do under Chapter 6 is raise that I'm now culpable, this is why, make comprehensive proposals and come join us, the people, as a champion for how to reform that particular office. But if you keep holding it, then we tamper with the bar. Because I worry now that the culture in our government institution and independent agencies is very different. Is political compromise, as opposed to the rule of law. That's problematic at all levels. Because increasingly, for me to push my matter right now, I need to study the current list of CSAs, who is the head of the public service, who is connected to power to push. That will become a culture. So we need to have this particular conversation. And let's remember, for instance, what happened the first time when Commissioner was at CIC, the very first time when we had independent institution. Like what has happened with DCI or DPP, by now the Commission on Administration of Justice would be on it as well. Okay? As a complaint, as a space for public complaints. They raise it, they take it to Parliament. Given the last Parliament failed us terribly, there was no oversight. Actually, they should just have co-opted themselves as civil servants in this country. Parliament, again, is not helpless. They can't just issue recommendations. The executive may control the budget, but the person who ought to ultimately control budgets is Parliament. Is it time Parliament takes up the proper role and ensures people who are reducing confidence in our public institution, in our values as a nation, are defunded, okay? And we move into the right priorities. Because right now, police need pay increase. IPOA needs to be better resourced. I am sure ODPP will need more resourcing. EACC, asset recovery, at a time when we are facing an economic crunch. Where does it matter the most for us to invest so that we change the culture and be able to sustain ourselves economically, around all our freedoms, economically, socially, and politically? We must try our best to do that. Definitely, as civil society, then we've also been challenged that we needed to do more, okay? I won't defend ourselves, but I will also state, for instance, the office of the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution indicated that he's going to withdraw cases against human rights defenders who've been targeted with arrests that are supposed to derail them around their freedom of expression, their work on accountability. But there are a number of cases that had been preferred by the DPP, and civil society moved to the High Court on issues of constitutionality because they were just being brought forward to intimidate people. So with all this aggregation of issues, there is something we must deal with. There is an interference that existed. There is a new culture that is not good for our criminal justice. I'm sure it is not even good for our it's not good for our justice system, our accountability process. That needs a public discussion. If Parliament failed, the judiciary, we are not yet sure. DPP had their weaknesses. DCI, Kenya National, IPOA, EAC, then there must be a higher conversation. How did we get to where we are? Okay. We got a task force and got us a discussion, and we reconstituted and resteered. Maybe it is not even reconstitution. It may be something, reconfiguration. If IPOA, as we designed it, as an independent oversight authority, is not working, you know, the IPOA Act, when police trigger a bullet, they are supposed to condone the area, call IPOA. Have you ever seen IPOA saying, we are coming here to the site of a police shooting? Never. Okay? So if that implementation is becoming problematic, what must we do? Otherwise, we cannot keep mocking the same laws that we have promulgated for ourselves. Okay. So it's a very deep and systemic issue that needs urgent dialogue. Currently, MPs are prioritizing CDF Act, the CDF fund that has been declared unconstitutional to come back. But with this confidence crisis, that the topic for today, I agree, there's a confidence crisis. Can it become a priority? And we get a way to discuss it, resolve it as soon as possible, so that the next set of Kenyans, we are not looking for angels. We are looking for Kenyans who are willing to live the constitutional spirit.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Diana. Now I am on borrowed time. So as briefly as possible, your last word, Perpetua.
My last word. First of all, she said that one of the reasons they don't really get, that will be helpful in the investigation, is installation of CCTV. We have seen that happen in some of the police stations in the communities. We don't know if they really work. We are yet to know if they really work. Another thing, my way forward is, we are not really fighting you. We want to work with you because when we have cases, we bring them to you. But also, it's about time that the government, so instead of reshuffling the alleged perpetrators, they should actually maybe put them on hold, or not, maybe give them a break, so that the investigation can go on, so that they can be prosecuted. And then, because in the case of Nasir, he was from Dandora police station to Kamkunji with different cases, and then now he was taken to Pangani police station, and then now he's in a different department of traffic without really being brought before court. Yeah, and we did the investigation, and we saw that he's capable of the crime that he was suspected of. Another thing,
okay. I really have to cut you short there, so that also Commissioner has Commissioner.
I have a really
quickly.
We want the police reform service to be completely transparent for the communities, because if IPOA are complaining about these challenges, where do the community that they serve, the people they serve, the citizens, come in?
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quickly, before I go, we made a recommendation on AIE, station commanders being AIE holders. We have a real big challenge with the amounts being disbursed. We are hoping now that the Inspector General has been made the accounting officer of NPS in control of the funds for the service, he should be able to increase that. Why? It's because those commanders take care of a number of things that affect especially persons who are offenders within those facilities. The role of NPSC, when we investigate a matter and the same requires disciplinary action taken immediately, we notify, and that is on the issue of the transfers, where a person has committed an offense, and the next thing, instead of having that person go through the legal process, the criminal justice process is transferred. And you know, that is actually aiding and abating crime. So what we have been doing actually where deaths have occurred is we write immediately to NPSC and the Inspector General, first to disarm, and the second issue is to have a disciplinary action taken on that particular officer. Now, the other is dual. We have where the inspector, the IG, the commander, and the officer responsible who has caused yeah, I need to go.
I need to. I need to cut you short.
I have a lot to tell
but
you.
I will invite you again because clearly there's a lot more we need to get into where this conversation is concerned. My apologies, Perpetua. My apologies, Commissioner. All right, we have Winnie Lubembe, who has been staring me down. I can feel the heat in the back of my head. Winnie, what do you have for us in the next hour?
100%. I'm like, Olive. So today, of course, on Your World, we'll be addressing the fact that we're actually heading towards the COP27. And there's so many things that were promised during the COP26. And of course, one of the things, includes, stopping emissions as well as coal, but also make sure that there is enough financing, especially for developing nations. So today, we just want to look at the commitments versus the deliverables, and of course, how climate change again affects all of us. So that is what we'll be looking at on Your World.
All right, we'll leave it to you. The issue of crime scene management is where we've pinned this conversation. We shall create another opportunity to continue. Good morning.